So we have these small banks. We've talked about why you like them, why you have convinced me to like them. But do you have to assess small banks in a different way than you do big banks?
Yeah, absolutely. I think starting with a small bank. In the environment we're in today, there are two real core criteria that I look for first. One is a loyal, low-cost deposit bank. So one advantage that community banks have is that they're very strong. They have very strong footprints in their communities, and the people who have their money stashed in them are unlikely to be very price sensitive. So, if you look at some of the internet banks that are around today, generally speaking, they compete very vigorously on interest rates. If you look at Bankrate.com or something, and you look at Bank of Internet and First Internet Bank of Indiana and all these names, they advertise pretty attractive interest rates to try to lure deposits into their balance sheet. Community banks don't have to do that. They get deposits simply by virtue of being a community pillar. And so if you look at Suffolk Bancorp or some of these others, Cascade Bancorp out in Oregon, their cost of funds is literally somewhere around 12, 15 bips right now, basis points. So that's
crazy.
Way less than 1% or 2% or so on and so forth. Obviously, it's a low interest rate environment, but even though their interest rates that they're giving their customers are so low, customers aren't taking their money out. And so that's a really big advantage to have in any environment. And you can sort of test the loyalty of a deposit base by looking back through at the financial crisis and say, hey, when these banks were threatened, as many of them were because it was a tough time to be a small bank, did the depositors start to flee or did they add money to the bank? And if you've got a loyal, low-cost deposit base, that's a really nice place to be. And then the other thing is a low loan-to-deposit ratio, which is just to say how much of the capital on the liabilities side of your balance sheet have you loaned out in the form of assets. If you have a relatively low, and there's no blanket vanilla statement that all community banks are conservative or some are,
right.
They'll depend from geography to geography and management team to management team. But if you can find a low cost funds and a low loan to deposit ratio, which you expect to expand, generally speaking, their loans should reprice more rapidly than their deposits as interest rates rise, and that's when you'll see some extra juice show up on the earnings line. So the third piece to look at after you find those two criteria are what region does the bank operate in? Because unlike Bank of America, which could take a loan from or take a deposit that you make here in Virginia and loan it to a homeowner in Seattle, ostensibly, right? Burke and Herbert takes a loan from you here in Alexandria and generally speaking has to find somewhere else in Alexandria to deploy that capital. So different parts of the country are in different economic circumstances. D.C., the government is always hiring. It's the big joke around here. And so D.C. is usually a pretty attractive place to think that a bank can grow its balance sheet. Flint, Michigan, probably not a place where the local bank has a lot of opportunities for growth. So after you look at the characteristics of the bank, you certainly want to look at the characteristics of the environment in which it's operating and make sure that the opportunity exists there for some growth probably.